Good morning, everyone. For Avita, so glad to see everybody, and a special welcome to Pamela because she hasn't been with us for a while, and we're glad to have her back. Thank you for joining us for this week's Dharma Talk here at beautiful Bali Rica and on the internet. We'll open our session with a guided meditation uh, given by Miss Lisa Virtue, the most aptly named person I know. There we go.
Thanks, Ruthie. All right, Ruthie asked to start off with a stretch, and then I've got some other ideas to weave in. So let's just begin by taking a deep breath, bringing your hands up to the sky, stretching up nice and tall. Interlace your fingers, turn the palms up, and now lean over to the left, stretching the right side of your body, and up to center, and over to the right, back to center, up to the sky again, and release. And then interlace your fingers again, stretch your hands out, arch your back, or backwards back, and release, and then your hands behind you, and stretch your chest out front. Release, and then just shake it up. Alright, so let's close our eyes and take 3 deep clearing breaths. Settling yourself into this moment, into your meditation, arriving on your cushion or your bench. And today we're going to do something a little different. You just place the palm of your hand down on your thigh. And you'll use your other hand, your fingers, to just trace the back of your hand. So feeling the veins, feeling the fingers, just with a loving kindness. And as you're doing that, you might find that other thoughts try to overlay in your mind, take over. And so just notice if that happens and invite them to depart and bring your awareness back to the sensation. Just being very present moment, witnessing just what that sensation is. Noticing your impulse for how fast or slow you want to go, what part you're focusing on, all with an awareness and no judgment. And you're welcome to keep this up the whole time, or anytime you feel complete, you can just rest your hands and come into a quiet meditation. Maintaining that idea of being very present in the moment, only focused on what is right now. that as our cue to take a deep breath and start coming back. And slowly open your eyes and try to maintain that calm presence, open to receiving.
Thank you. Thank you. Today's talk is being given by Jeff Olson, and he's taking a seat, period.
We're going to do week 2 on enlightenment. If you were here last week, Ruthie talked about the Buddhist, and some of the ideas from the Buddhist background about the road to enlightenment. I love the topic. It's a topic that we have not specified in 5 years. We talked tangentially about it, but these 2 weeks will be about enlightenment. If ever you want to have a topic that you wonder about, all you have to do is go to the internet these days and start to see what other people have to say about the topic. I have in my notes about enlightenment a bunch of quotes, and I'm going to do them at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end because they're weighty. If we did all of them in a row, you'd be like, oh my goodness, what was that? That was just a load dumped. And so I'm going to do 3, 4 at the beginning, 3, 4 in the middle, and 3, 4 at the end. And these are directly from the internet about enlightenment, both from a Buddhist perspective and then from some other writers. Also, to give a shout out to the poster industry. Interestingly, not all of them are just superficial things that you put on a kid's wall. Surprisingly deep things from that realm. So anyway, I want to start with some enlightenment quotes from a variety of sources about a variety of topics that are connected to enlightenment. The first one talks about oneness as a symbol, as a destination for being an enlightened individual. Last night, I lost the world and gained the universe. It isn't by getting out of the world that we become enlightened, but by getting into the world. By getting so tuned in that we can ride the waves of our existence and never get tossed because we become the waves. Fits with surfing, doesn't it?
Who was it?
Anonymous.
No. Beautiful.
Beautiful. About oneness. The second one is about self-understanding as it relates to enlightenment. Knowing others is wisdom. Knowing yourself is enlightenment. Anonymous. This one has to do with how you realize enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a change into something better or more, but a simple recognition of who we already are. That has total Buddhist origins.
Speak up.
Let me read it again. Enlightenment is not a change into something better or more, but a simple recognition of who we already are.
Is it just recognition, or is it also acceptance?
of course, and understanding. Yes, it's all
It's
of that.
not just, I know I do this, it's also, I know I do this.
Yes, yeah.
The Buddhists call it remembrance.
Say, go ahead.
The Buddhists call it remembrance. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, for example, go into the light. It is your own true self, but it's to remember. Uh, so it's all of those things, is to be aware, to recognize, to understand.
To choose to
But
act.
actually, they're saying what we ultimately come to is home, and home is a remembrance of who we were to begin with, to start with, what we essentially are.
One more. The ego tries to convince us that we must do things to achieve enlightenment. The spirit knows that enlightenment is not a matter of doing, but a magnificent consequence of being.
Remembering, it's perfect.
It's not a matter of doing, it's a magnificent consequence of being. That's Dean Jackson. I have no idea who that is. Look him up if you want. So with that start, I wanna do some other things as it relates to enlightenment. The first set of things are two P's. And Ruthie talked a bit about this last week, and I put two P terms to what she was talking about, and that is people evolve, progress, alive, are because of one of these two ways of developing. One, punctiliar. Good word to learn.
Yeah. Say that again.
Punctiliar. Punctiliar, at a point in time, something changes and aha. Eureka, she said last week.
Oh, okay.
That's what means superior?
Punctiliar. Punctiliar means at a point in time, something changes. Let's think about this as it relates to birth and death. At a point in time, we take our first breath in the atmosphere. That is a point in time where we begin to quote live. You can debate about all the fetal stuff. Okay, we're not going to do that. But at a point in time, you begin to breathe. At another point in time, you take your last breath. Both of those are transitions. Both of those are punctiliar. At a point in time, we are not what we were before. We are not where we were before. We might be exactly the same, but and some of this is a mystery. Not the birth as much. We can analyze that, but what that process is, we do know that there's a last breath. That's a punctiliar idea. The Buddha had these under the Bodhi tree, and out of it came the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path that we have up there.
You didn't run naked down the road either.
He didn't run naked down the road and said Eureka.
No,
That was Ruthie last week. I got no nakedness in this.
That's
Nothing.
good.
Nothing naked.
I'm so glad.
Jesus had a punctiliar moment on the Mount of Transfiguration. At 30 years old, supposedly the story goes, that he was changed into what his mission was for the next 3 years. If you do the history of it, it's a very interesting spot. It's the furthest that he was ever away from where he would end up. The furthest he went away, and at that moment he knew, supposedly, what his mission was for the next 3 years. We talked last week, Saul, who became Paul on the road to Damascus, a peculiar moment of dramatic change. Love at first sight, a peculiar idea. We could continue on. These are dramatic, life-changing things that happen, and we are changed. Interestingly, we many times set up things like this in the United States. Age 16 is a peculiar moment in time when you're allowed total freedom from your parents.
What do you mean, lawfully or?
Lawfully by getting a license.
Oh.
All of a sudden you can drive away, and if any of you have been parents and watched your kid drive away in your car for the first time, you know the power of the peculiar moment. I remember. Less worried about my daughter driving away, much worried about my son driving away. I hope they listen. All right. All of these things are like quick fire in cooking. There's something dramatic, important that happens, and sometimes we set these up. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, baptisms, anniversaries, Valentine's Day. These moments in time where all of a sudden we are supposed to have changed. I don't know how many of you have gone through a wedding ceremony and you ended up at the end as the same person that you were before you had the ceremony.
Just drunk.
Thank you for the contribution.
I'm Ruthie who doesn't drink.
Yeah, right. The lady who doesn't drink.
And I observed.
So all these ways are ways that we can change. There are also religions that are based around this idea. If you even think my background, as you can tell with some of these illustrations, are Christian theology, and those things that there's much about being changed in a moment of time in that literature. Baptisms, conversions, and people sometimes are indeed transformed and become enlightened. The less dramatic way is the other P word, not peculiar, but process. We change and evolve over time. How you are today is probably not how you all were when you were 5.
Thank you, Lord.
When you act like a 5-year-old, it's inappropriate because people look and they're like, wow, not 5. And so the process is over a lifetime, we are holding on to good as it appears.
Say that again, please.
That the process of enlightenment is to hold on to good as it appears
Over time.
over time.
Incrementally.
And also release what is not good. I have said to my children, so this will be no surprise as you listen to this, take what you like about me and keep it in your person, in your parenting, in your family life, in how you work in the world. The things that don't work for you, let it go. Let it drift away, and you will be a more enlightened person than I am. Holding on to good as it appears, your true self. It is home. This idea of enlightenment doesn't much appear to have room for mistakes. But enlightened people make mistakes and do it in an enlightened way, in the resulting manner. And do it gently with themselves, or that was a mistake. The openness of that idea is enlightenment. The admitting of a mistake, the apologizing for mistakes, the asking for forgiveness for mistakes as it relates to others is an enlightened prospect, even though it's not necessarily holding on to good, but it's repairing something that's not good. Enlightenment is about the openness. Your question? Okay.
Yeah. Enlightenment, becoming more enlightened. So I'm kind of like,
Mhm.
okay, so if you're more enlightened, it's not either or. You're not either enlightened or you're not.
Yes.
You're more enlightened than before, and that means you're easier on
Want me to get
yourself,
it?
or you're more
Turn that off.
understanding, or you're better than you were before.
Sharon, what you're talking about is where most of us are going to land on this.
Yeah.
It's not, we were so dim-witted, we were so in the dark, and now we walk in the light. That would be sweet.
Seven.
And
Sound.
yet,
Mute. It's on mute.
Yes, thank you. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
My
it's okay.
apologies to everyone.
Next person.
Just keep it over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
so most of us are at the spot of this processing enlightenment. And to be honest with you, it's probably a very solid road. Ruthie talked last week that it's difficult for the modern person to say, I'm enlightened. It seems like the train has arrived at the station, you're good.
I'm highly egotistical.
There's a lot of ego. There's a lot of ego.
You know, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the modern person is much more of what you're talking about. That this is a process by which you are steps ahead of where you were before. And I'm giving an illustration in treatment. I worked in a treatment center. Those of you who have struggled with sobriety, recovery, those kind of things, people mess up. In treatment, they say that relapse is a part of recovery. It's not excusing it, but going a step back is a part of the recovery process. AA does this very interesting. They're very punctiliar in this, where you start at day one when you haven't used your substance anymore, and hopefully you progress to big numbers. If you mess up, it's not a gentle approach. It's start over at zero. It's another punctiliar idea. You messed up, go back to zero. Go back to get out of jail free, only it's not free. Now you have to pay the consequences of that. When I did counseling in treatment centers, when people would leave the treatment center and go and use their substance, and some of them made their way back, and if they were wanting recovery still, they were given shots at joining the community again. When they would come and meet with me and tell me their story of relapse, I would say to them, how many days forward did you go in your recovery before that? They would say 80, 100, 120. And I'm like, and how many days was your relapse? 1 day, 2 days. So I would say, well, it strikes me that you're 118 days ahead of where you were. So let's pick up at 118. And they're like, well, AA doesn't let you do that. I'm like, I'm not AA. You have made progress. Let's recognize that toward enlightenment about your sobriety, toward becoming enlightened about your sobriety. You took be gentle with yourself. That doesn't mean there isn't things to learn about those 2 days. But pick it up, get back up on the horse where you left off. And that idea is a process idea. It also fits very nice with Buddhism, where when you make what you consider to be mistakes, be kind to yourself. We all make them. We all will make them. Get back up on the horse. I often, with clients currently, talk about a road, whatever road they're on towards resolving whatever it is they came into the therapy with. There are many detours available. Those are unenlightened paths of your mind, of your choices, of your habits, and those, as soon as you are aware, the very first step in Buddhist idea, that is a detour that I'm ready to turn the signal light onto. You stop the car. You recognize that you could go on that detour. Fits beautifully with how you started the meditation. That if something distracts you, notice it, let it go. Come back to your breath. Come back to the road. It's again about finding our home over and over and over again. That's enlightenment. It's the slow cooker way of changing. It's not quick fire. It's the slow cooker, the crock pot.
Better flavor.
Better flavor in the end. Probably something that you can, that's more robust and you might be able to trust. Every time you have a punctiliar moment, there's a lot of processing about what that is and what that means, and whether now I'm looking for the next punctiliar moment by which I change. If you do that, for sure it won't show up. And so we change in both of those ways. I'm not actually putting down the punctiliar idea. I think it's very interesting that some people come to ahas and they're enlightened. Do you have any comments? Because I want to go into a new section. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I
about
think one leads to the other. I commented last week that these punctiliar moments, as you call them, these sudden things that just happen suddenly, usually come after years of concentration beforehand.
Hmm.
And then, bam, it's there. Whether, so the Buddha wasn't enlightened like that. He was enlightened like that at that moment. But he had spent 6 years of all kinds of self-mortification. He had been sitting in meditation for 49 days, etc., etc., etc. So the moment that was punctiliar was preceded by years of consciously making progress towards what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Our poem says, "You must ask for what you want." And then all of a sudden, which was not conscious, in other words, in the sense that he couldn't create it. Does that make sense? In other words, he could direct everything in the progress, but the punctiliar moment just took its own place.
Had its own life.
Yeah, transformation and transcendence just are at the moment.
Also,
Can I ask just a question? These concepts are present in so many other change theories, and in your substance abuse arena, many of the researchers were using concepts like a pre-contemplative stage and a contemplative stage.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to stay, as long as you're in a pre-contemplate, you're not going to have that vijika, you're not going to make that move. You're going to constantly be bouncing back and forth because you have other rationalizations that keep you in a pre-contemplative, non-thinking state.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that those concepts are in a lot of different places. sociological places, psychological places.
I have 10 that I'm doing next, and you could probably add 10. You added one. Another realm of treatment talk. So the beauty of these Buddhist ideas have been filtered into many disciplines. How do you become an enlightened parent? How do you become an enlightened worker? How do you become an enlightened woman? How do you become an enlightened man? Many realms are talking about this. How do you become an enlightened spiritual person? How do you become an enlightened person, foreigner living in a foreign country? All kinds of roads of enlightenment. And so it's very holistic and round. And all of these are inclusive and a part of it. I think there's a oneness about this idea. Any other comments or questions? And otherwise I'll bring up some of those.
I'm not sure if I know how to explain in English, but I observed that when I want something too hard, the effort, because like the tension of getting something. Okay, I want to get enlightened. Each time I do that, it doesn't work because there's a pressure there. So if I'm not expecting anything, that's when things happen. So I see people meditating and they want something to happen. They want it so much to check. Oh, it's gonna happen, and I'm watching it, and it's gonna never happen because there's too much pressure. You need to just like the time we were meditating once with Lisa, and she says, just bring your palette, the palette you call it, up and floating. You feel like you're just floating and you're not into tension into wanting something. You just like let it be, and if it happens, it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it happens. It's when we let go.
But you prepared for that moment.
Yeah, you put your wish on it
Yeah,
on the shelf.
you practice enough to be able to build a framework where you could do that. And then you let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go.
It's like putting a wish
Is
in the
that-
universe.
And then it just happens.
Then
But actually, it happens.
I'm a very visual learner, and so I have to see a picture of what you just said. The picture that I've used often about that is, and we've talked about this in other talks, is it's floating mindfully downstream. It's not floating willy-nilly downstream because there's rocks to navigate around.
You got into the river first.
Yeah.
You're not driving the boat. The boat's float by itself.
Yeah. The trying too hard is swimming against the current. It won't get you there.
That's a good way to put it.
And so I think sometimes people, the letting go thing sounds a little willy-nilly, just like, ooh, it sounds a little ethereal and aesthetic and spacey. There's a real earthiness to it in that you are mindfully aware of where you're floating. You're also mindfully aware of where you've been before you got in the stream. So I love what you said, though. That is a piece of it.
Can I just piggyback off of what you said? I think it's also a matter of being able to trust the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're reaching, when we're clamping,
Craving.
while we're clasping, craving, yes, it's coming from a place of distrust of the process of it, the process itself. So I just wanted to share that.
Totally.
Yeah.
It fits beautiful with the second noble truth. That the causes of our suffering, rather than our enlightenment, are clinging, grasping, craving, ignorance, delusion. And so when we hold that tight with power and control,
Trying to hold on to this control that we have some concept of, which we don't actually have control of.
I'd like to just add one thing.
yeah, then we're
All
going
the
to
time, and it's very important in the talk such as Jeff is giving, And you brought it up, which is very real. The Dharma does not shy away from paradox. That you have to practice for what you want, but you have to let go for it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's you can't be making judgments and have a lot of opinions, but you have to use good judgment. So there's always an equanimity balance that has to come into play with these things. And I think that covers saying it first one way and then another. You've got to practice and then you've got to let go of the practice. Just let it happen. That's kind of great.
I'm going to give you two, seeing you went there, because two of these ideas from different disciplines about enlightenment are with that paradoxical idea. One, and we talked about this endlessly. I talked about it endlessly, and I'm still not done talking about it, and that's detached involvement. There's a paradox of terms. If you can wrap your head around that paradox, you've done a major thing. That's why I continue to go at it, because I can kind of, I'm in there, and that kind of paradox is in both Buddhism and, interestingly, when I did the research for the other talk, it's in the coaching discipline. There's a whole discipline in the psychological field called coaching, and they use detached involvement as well. The Buddha talked about detachment, and yet underlying all that was not to detachment so that you lived in some kind of spatial place away from everyone else, but an involved detachment.
A very extreme example of what she was talking about, but one that everybody understands, is how often a woman desperately wants to have a baby and she cannot get pregnant. And all of a sudden she gives up on it. They adopt a baby, and the next thing you know, she's pregnant. It happens over and over
absolutely.
and over again. That's sort of, if you can visualize that process, that's, I think where it is. I'm sorry.
The Buddhist way is about easing up from the pressures, the expectations, the power, the control, all of the things that don't get us what we think they will, because they don't. The other two-sided coin is, interestingly, from personality theory. Tell me if you think these are good terms. I think they're on the tails side of a coin. Humility, openness, being negotiable, being willing to change. Those vulnerable things are the tail side of the coin to this. Strength, confidence, being determined, being clear-headed, landing somewhere, boundaries. All of those paradoxes blend into being an enlightened personality and having enlightened relationships. Both the vulnerable and the things that don't appear non-vulnerable, where you know where you land. And yet there's an openness to change toward your evolution. Those kind of things. I think that, interestingly, I'll give you a shout out, women, that I think that you're a little more global often on this two-sided coin about personality. That I can find how to be open, to be humble, to be negotiable, and yet I need to stand firm on this. And here I am, and I'm going to own this. This is what I am. This is what I do. This is how I will be at this current moment. And yet, will that be appropriate for me the next time? I don't know. So it's very interesting that enlightenment is about the polarities, about making a middle way, the Buddhist middle way, amid those polarities, even in personality. Let me give you a few others. Communication theory. Enlightenment is when you become self-regulated in communication. When you become self-regulated, you can speak your honest truth in a regulated manner.
This means self-regulated. What does that mean?
That means that you filter. If you're presenting and someone stops listening to you, you stop presenting. Why would you continue? And so that self-regulated thing is very global in what you do in communication, but it is about you. Many people say, you need to speak up. Maybe you do. You need to speak shorter. When you drone on, I can't stay with it. This kind of self-filtering, when you do this in communication theory, you become a good communicator. It doesn't mean that you filter the truth, but you filter how you present the truth, who you present the truth to, when you present the truth to them. All of that, all of that is um, an enlightened communication. Also, interestingly, in communication, which is part of, let's see, where are we at? Where are we at? Right word, right speech. The third of the Eightfold Path. Buddha thought it was a very important topic. In communication, that interestingly, you're there to be influential and to absorb influence. If it's going to be mutual, somebody talks, the other person empathetically listens. Then you switch roles and the other person talks and the other person empathetically listens. If that kind of flow happens, all of a sudden you have enlightened communication. We know when it's not enlightened, don't we?
Yeah.
We know when we don't speak our truth or are not heard, that this is not enlightened. And so in that realm, there's another one. In in healthy long-term marriages, relationships, families, friendships, things change and evolve. And then if we're willing to go with that flow downstream, skillfully, mindfully, every stage has something beautiful to offer us. I'm at the stage now with my older parents. This is not anything like anything we've done before.
For them too.
For them too. And in the struggle to make that transition, really, really important to be on a road of enlightenment about what your role is, what it isn't, the progress and the process of that. If you do it too punctiliar, trouble ahead. And so to be involved with yourself in that process and let them be involved in that is enlightened. Just listen to the people who talk about the end of life transitions. The other thing that's really enlightened, and I just say this because it's part of relationship theory and marriage and family therapy, is that it's really good to spend time with people and then not with people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems with Costa Rica, one of the problems with the pandemic, is that people spend too much time together.
Or not enough.
Or not enough. And so enlightenment about connection and disconnection will create a middle way balance that will be full of life and full of energy and full of evolutions in your relationship. If you hold too tight, you will lose it. If you don't hold on at all, you'll lose it. You might gain it in on the surface. It might still be a marriage intact. There might still be a friendship that you're like, yes, that's my friend. But at the end of the day, without involvement and non-involvement, the energy is lost of the relationship attachment. That's enlightenment, connection, disconnection. Whatever you're most prone to will be your greatest flaw in coming that. So you have to practice the thing that you're the least good at. That means that you're not that good at attachment. There's your homework to become balanced in that area. By the way, all kinds of couples where one person is the attacher and the other person is the detacher. This is tough work. So much better if we each individually work on that. A road of enlightenment. I'm going to quickly go through the other ones, and then we already talked about going with the flow. I want to go to the Unitarian benediction that we end with, that Ruthie ends with. This is enlightened. To go in peace. To go making peace. To be gentle in our walking, mighty in our loving, and bowing to the mysteries. This is enlightened ideas. If we walk out of here even with an ounce of that, we are on the road. One of the reasons why we come here is to stay on that road and be encouraged to take on the road. Those of you that have been here 5-6 years, I'm assuming that some of these things, you're latching on to new things now that feel more enlightened to you. But the early stages were about the basic enlightenments. And we keep going back to the basics, so it never hurts. I'm so glad you gave us that enlightened benediction.
Mm-hmm.
That's the road to enlightenment. Peaceful, gentle, mighty, bowing to mysteries. It's enlightened material. And it only becomes really enlightened material when we absorb it, when we take it in, when we allow it, when we choose it, when we act it. I'm going to skip the one that's controversial.
Oh.
You want controversial? You want controversial? Okay. All right. I think that I know I teased them with that one. Sorry. Sorry.
See, that was psychology.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about whether it's better to be a sprinter or a distance runner. To put it into physical terms. Is pace an important part of enlightenment?
A big.
One side.
Those of us that are older, I'm going to give you our bias. Slower is better.
Yeah.
We didn't grow up in this world. We're there. We're here now. We're trying to learn. We're trying to learn all the technology that comes with quick things. And we're on track, but it's not in our nature. And also, the older you get, the slower you get,
And the faster time goes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And so, how do you have an enlightened pace? And the only thing that I have to say about that, and maybe this isn't controversial at all, is there's a time to sprint and there's a time for the distance run. If you're in an emergency and you're being asked to respond to the emergency, run. Do it. Make it happen. That's appropriate. That's the right enlightened pace. If you're slow, you don't get to work in the emergency room. And so, it's interesting that to be adjustable in the pace with which we do things. It seems to be more of an enlightened.
Well, you need to be very aware of what's going on in order to make the right choice of whatever your response is,
You do.
whatever your pace is.
You do.
I see a lot of people making huge crisis moves over something totally petty.
Mhm.
And and vice versa, taking very casually things that are really catastrophic. So because they're not aware,
Mhm.
they're not evaluating.
So the goal of that is awareness.
The
Which
common
is enlightening.
metaphor, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. In relationship counseling, I'm like, we're here to build some of the finer tools in your toolbox. You already got the hammer, you got the two kinds of screwdrivers, but they're not to do the fine tuning job that's next. That takes a very skilled tool, and that takes some development and attention and awareness that a hammer won't do.
I'm curious that seems like one of the most simplistic things we've discussed. Why did you see that as controversial, or was that just dating?
I think it's controversial because of our generation sitting in this room.
You talking about me?
What?
I think because I think
really?
I think the training is the quicker is better.
Well, it's also the change thing. I mean, the Super Bowl ads. I don't watch Super Bowl, but I was like, oh, I can't wait for the ads. I didn't get them. Yeah, I didn't get them. And then the music. Oh my God, it's famous from the.
It was one of the most popular music ones ever.
And they loved it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in trouble.
That's awesome. Good. Well, and you're middle aged, so you're in the middle spot. So you're back, so I'm going to be nice to you.
I told you that this last birthday, I said all of a sudden I had a punctiliar moment which said, Ruthie, you're a relic. I'm completely out of date with anything. I mean, I'm still living 30, 40 years ago. I'm still living with rotary telephone technology, you know?
And so in that
It's
area,
very disconcerting,
it
actually.
is. You're not very enlightened in that
No,
area.
I'm totally. Yeah, my only enlightenment is I'm a relic.
Oh no, you're selling
The
yourself short.
no, it does. It comes to you. I can't. I don't know how to do anything anymore with what
With what you have.
with the tools that people are using.
Right.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
About quicker and slower and which is that, it makes me think of when you subconsciously are aware of something. And I guess it's the wisdom that comes with being enlightened that you act on it or not. And I think at times where my inner voice or something really loudly or very subtly tells me that's something. And when I act on it and it's good, it's like, wow, that was something I heard.
Yeah. You heard from here, I think.
Yes. And then the times that you don't, and you think, I thought something said not to do that or to do that. So I'm wondering if that enlightenment, that is what that is. That's part of becoming enlightened. And trusting that voice.
And it's intuitive when you develop yourself to this level to trusting your inner light.
Very important. That's what meditation is all about. Is to be able to hear that intuitive voice and have it be clear, not overlaid with too much effort.
Let me do a few more quotes and then I'm going to stop. What is enlightenment? It is a complete and total non-attachment to one's own thoughts. And in the absence of attachment to one's own thoughts, all that is present is love.
Boy, is that powerful.
Yeah.
This fits very much with what we always talk about here.
This is the bottom line.
What is enlightenment? It is a complete and total non-attachment to one's own thoughts. And in the absence of that attachment to one's own thoughts, all that is present is love.
That is amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing and also tough to swallow.
Mhm.
It's well, you know it's right, and yet,
And in theory.
yeah, in theory and in spirit, that's
Well,
right.
it's amazing how many people have an aversion to it.
Mhm.
What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? We're going to get rid of it. We don't want none of that stuff. So there are a lot of people who have, I don't know why that is, but it's true.
Enlightenment is man's people's emergence from their self-incurred immaturity.
Wow. Get that one again.
Enlightenment are people's emergence from their self-incurred immaturity. Immanuel Kant,
Okay.
philosopher.
Yeah.
Attachment is the main thing blocking your path to enlightenment.
What is?
Can you do that
Attachment.
again?
Attachment is the
Okay.
main thing blocking your path to enlightenment.
Much after next
Ruthie will talk on next week.
week.
Oh, that's the next week's conference.
Yeah. He's absolutely right.
This fits
Attached
beautifully
involvement.
with about the effort part of enlightenment. Lasting enlightenment can only be achieved through persistent exercise of real love.
Okay.
3 more. To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things.
That's tough. And now you're getting into the esoteric
Yeah.
non-self. And that is what you have to reach before enlightenment.
We've gone down this path before.
Before you get to full enlightenment.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's when you get to be a Buddha.
If we look at the path, this is from Native American background. If we look at the path, we do not see the sky, and we do not see the sky. We are earth people on a spiritual journey to the stars.
Wow.
Our quest, our earth walk, is to look within, to know who we are, and to see that we are connected to all things, that there is no separation, only in the mind. Finally, the last one, which I saved for last. Enlightenment is not something to be attained as a human being. It is your natural state.
Mhm.
Your very core is composed of love and light. It is consciousness. It is the fallacy of ego and reality that prevents you from realizing your inner divinity. You must shed the illusions and you will be left with pure enlightenment. It is not something to be attained. You must lose and you shall be.
It's called self-liberation.
So anyway, this is a tricky topic because in our Western mind, we always think, as I presented, about this road and that the train has to get in the station. The joy is in the journey. There's a song that says, "There's a light we can love on the way," and that will be our road to enlightenment because it's there. You know your answers.
Mm-hmm.
You know where you are to go.
Intuitively.
It is home.
It is home.
When you go there,
It's the ultimate Buddhist
there's
comment.
the station.
It is your own true nature. It is home. And that intuition that Sharon's talking about is finding the one that knows that the light came on.
Mm-hmm. Comments, questions? These are These are big. If you ever want to study enlightenment, I just went and found these 10.
They're
I just
I
wanted
was
to
like,
say
wow, amazing.
I find that your talks are always wonderful, but those little like paraphrase of quotes really bring it home
Yeah.
in a very powerful way. So
Thank you.
yeah,
For me
thank you.
too.
Yeah.
And you find them everywhere.
Yeah, I know. They're all over the internet.
Well, in music, I
Oh
love Kenny Rogers. Know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run.
yeah.
I mean, that's philosophy.
Yeah.
You never count your money when you're sitting at the table.
That's right. He says,
Time and effort counts when the dealing's done.
When the dealing's done, you can count it. But that takes in the paradox and the need to make the decisions.
Let it be.
But-
Let it be. Words of wisdom. Let it be.
Mhm.
You know, it's all over the place. So.
Exactly.
Yes.
We're all swimming along on that stream, and we're all, letting go. The letting go is the secret, because if you have detached from an involvement with greed or hatred or anger or whatever it is, if it's not there anymore, you're free of it.
Yeah.
And when you finally get rid of all the defilements and you don't have them anymore, you're happy. And that's my talk. Good. Yeah,
Or
that was
you're
a good talk.
Very
happy
good talk.
sometimes,
Mhm.
What?
or you're happy sometimes. I mean, this whole thing about happiness that I've thought is considered. I don't think that we live in this, even with enlightenment, that
A
Very
vacuum.
happy.
this stream of happiness, because we're human. It's not a constant state. I mean,
It
we're going to
depends on
do
what
this all the time, and the more we're happy, of course, the better. But
Mhm.
to expect that we're going to gain enlightenment and always be happy, I think is not true, and it only causes more desire. Or
It goes back to that first quote about becoming the waves. When the waves of life come, you become the waves. Then you are happy despite it being a circumstance that could have in the past made you unhappy. You have not attached to that. You have reworked your mind about
That's
that.
also equanimity. Whatever happens, if you're in equanimity, then you're always happy. Whatever happens for a reason, and it's there on time for a reason.
Pura vida, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of that phrase.
I love
It
that
means
phrase.
many things, but it's instructive for us.
To come back to what you were saying, to trust the process. For me, I trust the process when I look, because we think, oh, well, those things happen to me if I just trust the process. But those aha moments happen to all of us in our lives. We have to go back in our childhood, different places. Sometimes we don't realize, but it did happen to us very often. So if we look back and we see all the time it happened to us, and we trust the process is going to happen again.
It is.
That, and another thing is, I wrote this play about life and death and grieving. And there's one sentence in it. It's like children, they're babies, they're born laughing. They don't know how to communicate. They don't know language. They don't know who you are. You just see people around them with love and attention to them, but they laugh. I mean, they come out from the room and like 2 hours after, sometimes they come out and they cry because they're like, oh, this is too much oxygen or whatever. But they laugh. So we are human. We are being of light. It's just we forget, and you take your first breath, and when you die, you exhale. You inhale, and then you exhale at the end. But in between, there's a lot of breathing, of course. But we were light when we were born, even before we knew how to communicate
Yes.
with languages.
Right.
I think just to get back to something Sharon said, I think there's a difference between turning away from and letting go. The two may sound similar, but I think a lot of people have turned away from things that either they don't understand or don't accept, and they're still clinging to them because of anger, right? So they haven't let
A lot
go.
of negative
Give an
emotions
example.
tied up.
Well, I don't want to get into politics.
Yeah, but it's
In,
very
in my
important. We're all
country,
doing it.
there's these truckers
We won't
are
get them.
blockading the capital, right? And they don't want just the end of mandates. They want to overthrow the government, right? So they're angry, and they're going to stay there, and they're going to get arrested, or they're going to lose their rigs, and they're going to stay there for freedom, right? That's what they said.
They think that's freedom.
But they are angry people.
Well,
and
people are
they have
angry
not
when
let
they
go.
people get
they're-
angry when
they're
they
trapped in that. They can't just drive their rigs away because that would be giving up. So the difference, I think, when I heard this talk is letting go means that doesn't matter. You know, what matters is what I do independently. With
what
my
you
life
do
and
about
how
it.
much I
What
know
you do
myself,
about it.
right?
Yeah. It all goes back
And
to
that's
that.
hard to do, but it's
You can do it.
It's entirely possible. I've seen so much progress in so many people when they get what you just said.
When they what?
When they get what John just said
Okay.
about not putting it aside, but actually really
There-
letting it go and being where they are. You are the difference that the world needs. You are the difference that you need.
Letting go doesn't necessarily, in the kind of sense that we're talking about on an everyday basis, it doesn't mean getting rid of. It can mean stepping away from, so that you can have a clearer view and observation of what it is. And to me, that's what Jeff is talking about. Detached involvement is not to shut off or turn away from, it's to step away from. So that puts space between you subjectively and the object. And that way it's much more manageable.
It is. Mark, you wanted to add something, and then I think we'll do our meditation.
All set.
Again, another great talk. And just to parallel with what John was saying, is there was a way to, and I think this is in keeping with enlightenment. I hope I'm conveying this properly.
Hard to
Um,
see.
What happened in Canada, or what's happening in Canada, if a series of people who had felt wrong or misunderstood or needed to express themselves had made the drive to Ottawa and had provided in one of those trucks a meeting place and had said to the government, please, we want to talk to you. We're confused. I don't know if we trust you that much, but let's talk it over. We've got this beautiful rig here. Join us in the rig. Come and talk to us. And maybe the government says, well, why don't you just come into the house? It's your house. Let's talk in there. What John's talking about is he's talking about an against energy, and we don't win. When we forcibly attack everything, that is not enlightenment. It's the antithesis of it.
That's just aversion, anger, and fear, and ignorance, and delusion, and all of it.
And I feel what Jeff is sharing with us today is that ability to be able to let go. What are you hanging on to and as John pointed out, what are you hanging on to that is causing you so much discomfort? That whatever answer is no longer attainable. There's no way to answer the problem in Ottawa because there's just too many voices yelling and screaming. Which one do you answer?
Yeah. Well,
There's always a way, and the Buddha says that way is the middle way, away from the extremes of
somewhere in
inaction
the balance.
and superaction are the answers, and this is true in all the realms, or like I said, enlightenment.
But isn't that what we're seeing? I know you need to end this, but
Yeah.
aren't we seeing in different societies and different governments this polarization, this tribalism?
Yeah.
There's no more compromise. There's no more statesmanship.
Well,
there's
that's
no
right.
more
And it
unity.
takes both sides.
It's like
On both
my
sides.
way
Yeah.
or
And
the highway.
no,
I
but it
agree.
takes both
Both
sides to
sides.
break
Yeah.
that.
And
The-
that's what I'm feeling.
The Buddhist way is to counteract that.
Yeah.
That's one of the one of many reasons why we're here.
But
Why we're doing this.
yeah, it's tough. All right, if we're going to do loving kindness, would you please begin for this by going back and reading the one that basically comes down to love.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep. What is enlightenment? It is complete and total non attachment to one's thoughts. And in the absence of attachment to one's own thoughts, all that is present is love.
Okay? For those of you who may be new, I'm going to say a phrase. You're going to pick a person that you're speaking it to whom you're speaking, and you're going to repeat it inside your head to that person. This is a loving kindness meditation. You begin with yourself. Close your eyes. Feel yourself. And say to yourself, may I be well. May no harm come to me. May I live with ease, that's equanimity, balance. May I live with ease, calm, and peaceful. May I be happy. Take a deep breath, smile to yourself, and bring to mind someone you love with all your heart. Look at them, say their name, smile to them, and say, may you be well. May no harm come to you. May you live with ease, calm, and peaceful. May you be happy. And now, with another smile, you move on to the third person, who's a neutral person, someone you just know but not well. Maybe you don't even know their name, in which case address them as friend. But someone for which you know, have not much feeling one way or the other. Certainly no animosity and no great connection. And you say to this neutral person, dear friend, may you be well. May no harm come to you. May you live with ease, calm and peaceful. May you be happy. Smile again, and we move on to a person with whom we are in conflict. They don't like us, or we don't like them, or it could be a very old aversion or a very new one, it doesn't matter. With no malice in our hearts whatsoever, look directly at them, smile to them, and say, may you be well. May no harm come to you. May you live with ease, calm and peaceful. May you be happy. Take another deep breath or two. Take your hands and put them over your heart, because the heart symbolically is the only place big enough, or space big enough, to embrace all sentient beings. All sentient beings include animals. Anything, anyone with consciousness. The universe itself seems to have consciousness. So basically, this is to embrace all that is. And you say the following: may all beings everywhere on this plane and all other planes be well. May all beings everywhere be safe. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering. May all beings everywhere be happy. Now, if you're at home, you can sit for as long as your being wants to sort of take these feelings of unconditional goodwill, of loving kindness into yourself on a cellular level. But here we have only this amount of time, so we're going to release our hands, open our eyes, turn to our neighbors and smile. Hi, guys. And we will say our benediction from the Unitarian Church. Like Buddhism, this is applicable to all spiritual paths, all religions, all people, everywhere, on this plane and all other planes. And so I will say the phrase, and then you will repeat it together. Go in peace.
Go in peace.
Go making peace.
Go making peace.
Living gently.
Living gently.
Loving mightily.
Loving mightily.
And bowing to the mysteries.
Bowing to the mysteries.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
We'll see you
you.
next week.
Wonderful. What'd you say?
Open the floor for discussion. Bryce,
Yes.
yeah, Bryce.
Yes, over here.
Where's Bryce? You got it. Oh, there you go.
Beautiful.
There we go.
By the way, if you ever want to go back to these are on our